last entry. So we are on Daf Ayin Aleph Amid Beis at the bottom. 4 lines at the bottom. We're learning as a chus for Shlema Filana Chaya Baserach. 4 lines at the bottom. Toshma. So we had brought the Machlekes, the Machlekes Amoraim, whether Mashiach is kaina for a non-Jew. Ramemer says it is kaina, and Rav Ashi said it's not. Toshma. Amar Rav Chia bar Abba Amar Rav Yochanan. Ben Noach nereg al pachas mishava pruta. A Ben Noach is killed if he steals even less than a shava pruta. V'loy nitin leheshava, and there's no din hashava on that. So Rashi says, Ben Noach shegazel Yisrael pachas shava pruta avagav the gabi Yisrael lava maynahu the machli aleh gabi avid kechavim the maynahu. The general rule is a yid is meichel for less than a shava pruta, but that's only a yid. You didn't have a certain, I guess the way I would understand is you didn't have a relationship with one another. There's a sense of community, and people are not so makbid on each other. So therefore, if it's less than a pruta, they're meichel, they're happy. But a benayach doesn't have that feeling, and therefore they're not. For them, less than a pruta is a significant amount, and therefore, if a benayach steals from a yid even less than a shava pruta, he's chayev. And the din is that, like Rashi says, ben noach nitztav al gezel was in hedgin v'azar shalahen zui misasim v'etzrichan asra, that the when the Torah says that ben noach is not allowed to do something, the shev mitzvah noach, they're all mechuyev misa. When the Torah says not to do it, it's saying, but if you do it, there's going to be a chiyev misa. So Zaktimar, what's the raya for our question of whether Mashiach is kaina? If you say Mashiach is not kaina, like Rav Ashi says, Amay nerag, why would he be killed? So this is the Rashi on Amid Aleph says, Amay nerag, on the first line, Halei kanya l'hach gzela, b'kol heicha de'isa shal Yisrael he. Since there's no kinyan, the guy was not kainet, so wherever it is, it belongs to Yid. So how could he be nerag for something that he's holding that doesn't belong to him? So Taisus goes into this, and this is an important thing to remember throughout Shas. So let's just quickly see the Taisus. This is on the bottom of Ayin Aleph Amabez. So Pirish Holy Kanya, Rashi says, "Well, is Rishus Yisrael. Kosher. Yisrael namile kanag ze'eliyah shaloi." When someone steals something, it doesn't become his. When he makes a kinyan, even if he makes a kinyan, it doesn't become his because the other person did not have a das makna. He wasn't masking to be makna to him, right? You can't just go into a person's house and say, "I'm taking this, and now it's mine." There's no kinyan. You have to have a kinyan, and even if you made the act of a kinyan, in addition to a kinyan, you also have to have the other person wants to be makna. So the Gemara, "Afilu hachi kanya l'schayev ba'intzin, hachiv d'shayech bei." But there is such a thing as a kinyan gzela, that it's sort of like a what do you call it? A probationary kinyan, or it's a kinyan for the purposes of the gzela. That if the gazlan or the ganef makes a act of kinyan, so he's kainet for those in the sense that he's going to have the downsides of the kinyan. That if there's an einus that happens to it while it's in his rishus, he's going to be responsible. If there was no kinyan at all, if there wasn't even a kinyan gzela, and someone picked up a kli that belonged to someone else, he wouldn't have a kinyan gzela. So if there was an einus, he'd be potter without a kinyan. So he does have a kinyan gzela, so that's v'hachanami yeshon l'loyme b'ben nayach shekanu l'schayev bob misa d'hainu achiv d'shayich. So Torah is saying, why can't we say the same thing, that the kinyan gzela, even though it doesn't belong to him, the kinyan mashicha is not kaina, but let it just work, that'll be mechuyev in misa, just like it's a regular yid who steals something is chayev in gzela. Yeshem avadi gazel Shavapruta dahavi b'mayna l'gabi Yisrael v'chitzru isum l'meimek dipirashtu. The Gemara says, so Taisa says the reason over here it's different is because it was less than a pruta. Since there's no loss to the yid because it's less than a shavapruta, and the yid, the guy did not gain anything because he didn't have a kinyan. That's the reason for the kasha. So I know this is a little bit extra, but I just think it's important because this concept of kinyan zela comes up a lot, and it's important to understand that this is an application of it, at least in Taisus. Rashi doesn't even hold of all this. Rashi just says that that he's not kainet because he doesn't explain at all why, but he just says he's not kainet. So Zakti Gemara. No, even though let's go with Taisus pshat. It's more detailed, but the Taisus's kasha was dependent on the fact that the yid did not lose anything. So he answers no, mishum de tzare de Yisrael. Even though the yid is moichel on less than a shavar pruta, but it still bothers him. He's annoyed. It's the principle of the thing. Even though he doesn't care about the money, but it's bothered that someone's taking, and that's enough to be mechayiv the guy. But if that's the case, what does it mean that there's no chiyav hashava? As Rashi says, since it still belongs to the guy, to the yid, what does it mean that there's no chiyav hashava? Of course there's no chiyav hashava. It's impossible to return something that belongs to someone else. So it means to say exactly that. It doesn't mean that there's no chiyav hashava, that he's not mechayiv to be meishavit. What it means is that he's unable to be meishavit because it doesn't belong to him. It still doesn't belong to him. If that's what you're saying, if you're saying that the guy was not kainet, and it's only mishum tzara de Yisrael that the guy is mechayiv misa. What about the brisa continues and it says that if a second guy came and stole from the first guy, neragala, he also gets killed for it. Bishlam areisha mishum tzara de Yisrael. In the first case, because there's tzara from Yisrael, that's why the guy was chayiv elaseifa mayavik. But in the second case, what has he done? Means when the second one takes it from the first one, it's not causing any tsar to the Israel. So who cares that it went from one guy to another? The yid has the same amount of tsar. No, not any more tsar. And if he wasn't kainet, then what thievery is there? The second one stealing from the first one must be his Mashiach is kainet, and therefore he gets a kinning zela, and that's why he's mechayiv mis. Hu gavra adam lechavre. Imazvina lo lahara, lo imazvina lo ela zavna le'ishachrina. I'm sorry, I skipped right. Shmami, hu gavra adam lechavre. Imazvina lo lahara lecha mazvinina. If I'm going to sell this land, I'm selling it to you. Meaning, he said, I'm not willing to sell it to anyone right now. But I'm going to make a kinyan right now, and if I ever decide to sell it, it's going to become yours. And he went and he sold it to a second person. Amrav Yosef Kanakama. Since he already made the kinyan, and now he decided to sell it to the second person, he said that I ever want to sell, I'm selling it to you, so the first one is kind. How could it be a kinyan, but there was no agreement on the price? And as we're going to see in a second, we saw in our Mishnah that if someone sells something, if you make a kinyan without a psak damim, without saying how much the price is, the kinyan is not valid. We said this l'gabe yayin esech. So we know the pasak lekana ditnan hamoichel, which from our Mishnah ditnan hamoichel yenu lavi kichavim pasak actually that if someone sold his wine to an lavi kichavim, if they made a psak, they made up the amount before he measured it, dam of mutar, and then the money he got is mutar, because we say that since it was a psak, so when the guy picked it up, he did a hagbah, he was kainet. Then later on, when he touches the wine, it's already his own wine, and the yid is mutar to take the money, because at the time that he got the money, at the time of the kinyan, it still was not yayin esach. But Mada Dachale Pasuk, if the guy measured it before his Pasuk, so he touched the Yayin before there was a Psak, before there was an agreement on the amount of Dam of Asurim, then is it actually, yeah, then the Dam of his Asa, the amount of money he got is Asa, because the guy touched it, and the guy picked it up to measure. He did Akbar, but the Akbar was not kind. And then when he touched the wine, there was still not an agreement on the amount. And then later on, they agreed on the amount. That's when the kinyan happened, and then it was already Yayin Esach. So tomorrow, my Havi Allah. So what's Taka the din? In fact, tomorrow, my Havi Allah, at the Kamrina, we just said that it depends on whether there's a Psak Dama. We brought a right from our Mishnah. So why are you asking about this case of where he said, I'm going to sell it to you. If I sell it, I'm going to sell it to you. So maybe that only in the case of Pasuk Damav, because of the din of Yayin Esach, we say just a kinyan without a Psak Damav, without a Psak is not a kinyan. But maybe generally you can be kind of without a Psak. But it's just a Chumrah of Yayin Esach in our Mishnah. Tashma, Dam Rav Yidi Barav, of the Hav Rav Chizda Bei Rav Huna, Upashta Mehadatnan. They had this question in general, not the Gabi Yayin Esach, in general, whether you need a Psak Dama, whether you have to come to agreement on the price in order for the kinyan to work. That's not. If someone dragged a donkey driver together with his donkey or his worker, he dragged them into his house. So that's not considered a Mashiach. If you drag a person carrying something, it's not a Mashiach. You have to drag the thing that you're trying to be kind of. Over here is trying to be kind of their burden. Dragging someone who's carrying something, it's still the other person who brought it in. So Bein Pasak Achale Madad, Bein Madad Achale Pasak Loikana. Whether there was a Psak Dama beforehand or not, is not a kinyan, because this is not a kinyan Mashiach. But Ushnei and Yechayim Lachsaman, and both of them could be Chayzer, because again, there was no kinyan. Parkan Vechnisan L'Tech Beisa, but if he took their burdens off of them, Pasak Achale Madad, if they made a psak before he dragged them in and did the kinyan, ain't shnei yechayim lachsaben. Madad atzlei pasak shnei yechayim lachsaben. So this is a raya that you're not going to be kind of until there's a psak damim, even outside of the context of Yayin Esach. Hahu gavred amalei lechavre. He mazvenina la laha ara mazvenina lecha b'mei zuzi. Said to him, if I'm going to sell this land, right now I'm not ready to sell land, but if I am ready to sell it, I'm going to sell it to you for 100 zuzi. So he made a psak damim of how much. But then another guy popped up and said, I'm willing to buy it for 120. He said, okay, listen, 120, I'm going to sell it. Amrav Kahana Kanakama. The first one is kind of, since he had said that I'm willing to sell it to you for 100 zuzi, if I ever sell it, and now until but he hadn't yet decided to sell it. Once he decided to sell it to the second one, it's Kani.
So the first case where he made it night to sell to the first person.
He hadn't agreed on a price.
So it should not be going to the first guy, it should be going to the second guy, because there was no psak, right? That's what we established.
We said, which on the first
Rav Yosef Konakama. So how do we understand Rav Yosef?
What you're saying, why is it different from the case of before?
Right. We just established that if there's no psak, then it's not a kinyan. So wasn't that the case of the first with the first field? With the
first field, but over here he was pasak. Over here he did make up a price. He said,
right. But earlier, before we were talking about the yayin nesach and the donkey.
He just said, if I sell it, I'm going to sell it. He didn't make up a price.
Right. And then we said that it goes to Rav Yosef says that Konakama.
Right.
So how do we understand Rav Yosef that the first guy should get it even though there was no psak?
Okay, yeah, here. So that was what Rabbi Yosef said, and Abaya asked on it, and we said so it's not a raya from Yayin Esech, so maybe you could be kind. No, so we came out that you could be kind of. So this is Abai is disagreeing with Rabbi Yosef.
Right.
Right.
Right. So
Abai is saying it doesn't have to be that there was a psak.
So we brought a brisa regarding modat pasuk at shalom modat, right? So that's
So that seems to prove.
that's a raya for a buyer, but that's how do we understand Rav Yosef?
Raya for a raya that against Rabbi Yosef. That's Rabbi Yosef said kanakama, and we're disagreeing with that. We're saying there has to be a psak dam. Abai, we're paskening like Abaya, not like Rabbi Yosef.
Right. Okay.
But now this case has
this a
nothing to do
brisa?
with it. This case is not relevant to that.
Right, but isn't Rav Yosef arguing on that? Is this a brisa?
No.
Well, in that case, Rashi says there was a Kenyan.
Which case? Which case are you talking about?
The case of the Hahu Gavid Amalei L'Chavi Imazvina L'Hachara L'Chamazvina.
Right, both cases there was a kinyan. Rabbi Yosef held that it shouldn't be kind. It should be kind of the kama should be kind
Because it was a Kenyan.
because there was a kinyan, and in spite of the fact that there was no psak,
Right.
but Rabbi proved that it's not true that you have to have a psak dama.
Right.
Now we're bringing a case that question doesn't come up at all because they did have a psak that a psak dama and they had a kinyan. That means originally Rabbi Yosef proposed that you could be kind of even without a psak damav in that first case of the masvina loch. If I'm going to sell it, I'm going to sell it to you. They didn't make up a price. Abai said that can't be. Our Mishnah proves not like that. And then we went back and forth, but eventually we came to the conclusion. We brought a straight raya that you have to have a psak dam. So you have to have an agreement on the price before there's a kinyan. So, but now we're bringing a case that's doesn't bring into that doesn't address that question at all. Over here, this second case of Ahu Gavra is talking about where they made up a price of 100 and they made a kinyan. So it certainly could be a kinyan, but as we're going to see, there's a problem because it's not the price that he originally made up. He sold it for a different price. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to sell it. If I'm going to sell this property, I'll sell it to you for 100. Also, and all of a sudden, someone offered 120. He sold it to him. I'm going to He said the first one is kind. Hi, Zuzi Ansu. He says this is not this. You can't compare. That's this case. He should not be kaina. The kama should not be kaina, because the person was not the seller was not really willing to sell it. He was only willing to sell it because of the exorbitant price that the other person offered. Maybe I wonder if it's because it's a fifth more, which is more than the amount of mekach toyis, right? We call it what is it called again? What is it called when you do more than a sixth?
I know.
It's more than the amount of Aina. So maybe that's why he considers it. He was sort of forced to do it. But under normal circumstances, so maybe that's the reason why over here he sold it. But it's not considered that he really had a das to be makne to the first one at this price. The Hilchos Rav Yaakov, the talk we paskin like this, that in such a case it would not be kani to the first one, but rather to the second. Another diff. If the two, a seller and a buyer, made up that we're going to sell it, but we're going to get an arbitrator or appraiser to be meshayim it and to estimate the value with three people. Afilu trei migoy tlasa. Even if you have 2 out of the 3 appraisers agree on the number, that's enough. Because when you say kedeshani tlasa, I want to make an appraisal with 3, it's an inference is that you're treating them like a bezdin. A bezdin can make a decision, and a bezdin only needs a rive 2 out of 3. Kedamri betlasa, if he doesn't take it like they'll estimate, which has a din of like a judicial aspect to it, but he just says like 3 people will say, Ad amri betlasa. Then you have to have all 3 agree on the amount. It's not a judicial opinion. It's just 3 people saying what they think. Kedeshaymi ba'arba. If he says like 4 people will estimate ad amri ba'arba, then you're going to need all 4 because there's such a thing as a bezdin of 3. There's no such thing as a bezdin of 4. You never have a bezdin of 4. So if even if he says I want it to be estimated by 4, there's no intention that it should be like a judge a ruling. Certainly, if he says like 4 people say, you need all 4. If he said, I want it to be evaluated by 3, and then the Rishonim explain that they had agreed they're going to get 3 people to make an estimate, and then the seller, for example, proposed these 3 people, and the buyer did not respond. So those 3 that were brought by the seller went and made an estimate. The buyer all of a sudden popped up and said, no, I want a different 3. Now I don't want those 3. Now that they've given their estimate, I didn't like what I heard, so I'm going to demand to get a different one. Amra Papa Dinahu de Ma'akiv. Riba says he can stop him from bringing others. Maskal of Huna Breder of Yeshua, Mimaidahani Kimlu Tvei, Domahani Kimlu Tvei. He said to him, no, L'chaira, he's just delaying. He just didn't like what he got, or he doesn't really want to sell it at all. So he's not able to delay by saying, I want another 3. You're not giving a reason why these 3 are no good. You're just saying it in order to avoid having to go through with the deal that you already were masking to. You already said that you're going to agree to the arbitration as far as the amount. So that's like a psak din, and you made the kinyan, so it's too late to go back on it. The Karhuna Breder of Yeshua and Takal Halacha is like this. Zok the Mishnah. Not Lasham Mashpach, but not Umat Adutai Sluchusi Yosef, Sluchi Shel Ovid Kechav. Someone took a funnel and he poured wine using the funnel into a barrel of a Ovid Kechavim, and the Ovid Kechavim's bottle more likely, has yayin nesach in it. Then they use that same funnel that had been used for the Ovid Kechavim's wine bottle and poured afterwards into a Yiddish barrel. It means it's a Yid who's doing it. If the bottom of the funnel has a lip that retains some wine, then the second bottle that you poured wine in using that funnel is going to be asur. We're going to say that the wine that was caught in the lip of the funnel when you were pouring from the Ovid Kechavim became yayin nesach, and now that yayin nesach, it touched as we're going to see, it became asur at yayin nesach, and then that yayin nesach will also asur the wine that you pour through the funnel that touches it. In the second din in the Mishnah, Hama'ara mikli al kli, someone who pours from one kli to another, someone pours from one kli to another. At this point, we think you're pouring from a kli of a yid who's pouring into that of a guy. So what's in the kli that you poured from is mutter. What you poured into is asur. So there's going to be it's going to need explanation why this is asur. It's obviously with l'chayra what he poured into is asur because it's yayin nesach and it becomes asur from the yayin nesach into it. But we'll see. Tanan hasa hanitzak v'akatafres u'mashka tefech ein chiba. A stream of water and kataphris is like a cataphract, rushing waters on a slope, umashka tefech, or a little bit of liquid that is on the surface, on a surface. They're not considered to be mechaber loyla tuma. It's not going to be tummy. For example, if you have water, let's say we'll pick the case of a stream. You have water that's going down in a stream from an upper kli to a lower kli, and there's a dead person in the lower kli, the lower body of water. It won't be matama what's in the upper body of water. If it was in the upper body of water, then the water would be going from there anyway into the bottom one, so it wouldn't be, obviously it would be matama. You get tummy water into the bottom. So it's not considered a chibur. It would not spread the tumah from the bottom one to the top one through that stream or through the rushing water, or even if they're horizontally equivalent, through a thin film of water that's not enough it's just moist, but it's not enough to make what's next to it wet. The loyla tyra, and also the lagabi tyra, if you have, for example, you have two bodies of water and neither of them are 40 saw, if they're attached by these things, it's not going to be considered enough to connect them that it makes it the shear of 40 saw. Hashbayrin, but if you have settled water, chibur l'tumah l'tayra, it would be a chibur. Amar Rav Huna, nitzik l'katafis u'mashka tefech chibur l'inyan yayin nesach. Rav Huna says, just like we said, even though we said it's not a chibur l'gabi tumah and tayra, the stream of water and the rushing water and the thin film of moisture is a chibur l'inyan yayin nesach, that if you have yayin nesach that's touching kosher wine, it's going to make the kosher wine yayin nesach. Where do you get this from? We're being medayik from this brisa. This brisa said that it's not considered a chibur for tumah and tyra. It's mashma yayin nesach, as we know, is more chomer. We're always more choshed on yayin nesach. So over there would be a chibur. You can't figure out anything from the diak because the reish is medayik one way, the sefer is medayik the other way, so you can't see anything. Tnan, not all samashbech. So we want to bring a right from our Mishnah. Not all samashbech. Umodad l'toich l'choisav shaloyv deicham v'chazam modad l'toich l'choisav shal Yisrael. If you took a funnel and you measured into the bottle of a guy, and then afterwards you measured into the bottle of Yedim, yesh ba'ikvus yayin also. If there is a lip that's holding back the wine, it's also ha'ikvus yayin, but ma'ikam mitzvah. What is making that wine in the funnel by pouring, when the Yid pours kosher wine through his funnel and it goes into the guy's bottle, what makes the wine at the bottom of the funnel yayin nesach? La b'nitzach l'chayr, it's from the stream, from the funnel into the bottle. Shmami no nitzach chibur. So you see, legabi yayin nesach, it is a chibur. Tani Rav Chia shepach sasayitz l'chaysiyeh. Like we saw this before a couple of weeks ago. No, this is not a rye. It's talking about there's not a stream, but the water, the wine in the bottle rose up all the way to the bottom of the funnel. But if it didn't reach the bottom, so this is a brisa that said, he's learned it from a brisa that says that it's talking about where it reached the bottom. That's mashma only because it reached the bottom of the funnel where it touched. But without that, it would not be considered to be mechaber. Tifshe denitzik ein chiber. So no, we're just coming to tell you a chiddush. One might say that if it's in a funnel, even though it's touching, since it's in a separate container, that might be considered separate. So we have to tell you that even when it's touching, even when the wine rose up to that level, it's still even though it's in a separate container, it's still considered to be yayin nesach. But nitzach, when leaving as a shiloh. Okay, we're going to have to stop over here. We'll have to try to make this up on Motzei Shabbos.
All right, thank you. Have a great job.
Shabbos.